Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, founder and CEO at Riderflex. We hope you enjoy today's podcast. And as a reminder, please subscribe to the Riderflex show for updates on new episodes. And by the way, if you haven't already, check out the book we recently launched, The Riderflex Guide, Inspiring and Hiring, available for purchase on Amazon. And now, a quick word from our sponsor.
Try the #1 marketing platform for small business. Everything you need from design to marketing to CRM. Learn more at marketing360.com. Marketing 360. Fuel your brand.
Scott Lewis on the Riderflex podcast. Hi, Scott. How are you today?
Doing well, Steve.
Recording this on January 3rd. So hoping your holidays were okay.
They were fantastic. Didn't do anything crazy. Just stayed home and around the area, and that was pretty good. We kind of go to a pretty flexible schedule in between Christmas and New Year's for our team. It's basically kind of do the work you need to do and wherever you want to do it, but stay flexible and kind of spend time with family and regroup for the next year.
Same here at Riderflex. Very flexible, a little bit of downtime for the troops. I just tell them, I'm like, hey, look, there's a couple of weeks here where it'll be pretty quiet. I don't really expect you to answer the phone unless you get a text from me that says 911.
Yep.
And it was quiet and it was good for us too. So tell me, you got a family? Tell me, are you married, kids, partners? What's the story?
Just married, no kids. We got a couple of fur babies, but that's basically I'll call it the three of us. We'll say they're halvesies each. So there's my wife, Lindsay, and our two Jack Russell Terriers.
Okay. All right. And your wife, Lindsay, tell me, what does she do? And how did you guys meet? Give us some personal stuff there, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no worries. So she's currently writing a book. Her grandfather was awarded every medal for valor the Army has.
Really?
So it's a pretty interesting story. He's a 3-war veteran. So that was one of the things that, she, from the day we met, she always talked about her grandfather and she'd been wanting to write his memoirs for years. And she used to work for us. She was our director of business intelligence here at Spartan. Okay. And we just were talking about it. And I'm like, hey, why don't you take this time and write the book, get that off your plate, and then we can decide what you're going to do later. So that's kind of what she's doing right now. She's got a kind of a finish date by the end of this quarter that she's been working on it for about a year or so. She's got a coach and everything else. So hopefully the manuscript will be done in the end of March. And it's a great story. I mean, his Medal of Honor citation reads catching enemy grenades in the air and throwing them back at him. Like charging machine gun nests with a pistol, commandeering machine guns. Like it's a pretty crazy citation.
Wow.
So that's what she's doing. And we met where a lot of couples meet at Scruffy Murphy's in Columbus, Georgia, when I was down at Officer Candidate School.
Oh.
Lindsay came down with one of her girlfriends that was in the same OCS company that I was, and fate would have us meet at Scruffy Murphy's. It's still there. We own a property in Columbus, Georgia now, and I went back and took a picture 15 years later in front of Scruffy Murphy's, and it's still there.
Nice. Now, was she in the service as well?
No, she's she was a civilian contractor as an intelligence analyst, but she was never in the service. So I just wanted to say one thing to the single ladies listening to the podcast here. If you want to find your man, if you go to Scruffy Murphy's, you've got a ratio of about 150 to 1.
Nice.
So your chances are terrible because that's where the Ranger battalions are. So finding Mr. Right at Scruffy Murphy's may or may not happen. But if you like a ratio, there you go.
Pretty cool. Very nice. Okay. Well, how'd you get to Colorado then? Well, let's go back. Where did you grow up? And tell me about your mom and dad or any siblings first, maybe, and then kind of we'll get into it.
Yeah, I grew up in the greater Detroit area in Michigan. Parents were solidly kind of like lower middle class, white collar. My dad was in the military, so it was actually interesting. So he was drafted to Vietnam, and he had an okay experience over there. He got lucky. He was an engineer. So He didn't see any direct combat, so he didn't have any issues coming home with that. And he was always very proud of his military service, and it was interesting. So on his desk, he had the patch for the 1st Cavalry Division. That's a big patch that's black and orange and has a horse on it to signify the Cav. It is the same unit that was portrayed in the movie We Were Soldiers with Mel Gibson.
Oh, really?
Yes. So same unit. So that would also be the patch that I would wear in Iraq, 50 years after that. Coincidentally, it's the same patch that my wife's grandfather was wearing when he was awarded the Medal of Honor. So there's some pretty crazy lineage there. But I've got a half sister, it's about 11 years older than me, and that's about it. I have an incredibly small family. I'm literally the only living relative to my dad. There is nobody else, and my dad died in 2012. So there is not another Lewis after me. So
interesting. So your dad, your mom and dad, they met. Your dad was married before then, I guess, or your mom was married before.
My mom was married. Well, my mom had a child before, so
I got you.
Not married, but yeah, I've got a half sister, and my mom had her before I came along, and then my parents got married, and the stork took a left and landed on Foxcroft Street in Harrison Township, Michigan.
Is your mom still alive?
She is. So she's back in Michigan, kind of just doing her thing.
She wants to live in Michigan at her age with the weather. I mean, she didn't want to come out to. I mean,
you ask so many times, and then you just let it go.
Okay, yeah. I'm like, Mom, you can come out to Golden, Colorado. I mean, we get snow here, but it's better than Michigan.
Yes, it is. But such is life. She's got her routines and whatnot, and I think that's just kind of where she's going to stay put.
All right. And was your dad? Was he pretty tough character? Was he? I'm assuming he was type A driven, pretty hardcore. Or no?
No, not at all.
Really?
No, not at all. We are basically the polar opposite of one another. In regards to drive, it's funny. I remember as a kid asking him why he didn't start his own business. Right now, I'm sure we'll get into this at some point, but I am not an entrepreneur. I get it by definition. I started a company, but I don't have entrepreneurial traits. I don't think I do. Not at least it's being idolized in the press today. Yeah. Maybe more of a traditionalist when it comes to that, but no, not at all for him side of the house. I look back, I'm wondering where I'm getting my kind of some of my traits from. And I got really lucky. I had two sets of parents. I had, my real mom and dad. And then I had this surrogate family from Italy that, I showed up one day because I met their son and basically never left. So I had two sets of parents that I was lucky enough to learn from two sets of parents that kind of valued different things. So. Wow.
Okay. All right. Well, did you get in trouble at home? Did your parents kick you out because you were being a rebel and you had to go stay with your friend, or what happened?
Yeah, no, I mean, I metaphorically stayed there. So
okay.
Yeah. No, not getting kicked out or anything else. I was actually a good kid, no trouble, no nothing. So.
Oh, all right. Were you a straight A student? Close.
80%.
All right. Did you, before you went to Michigan, before you went to Michigan State, did you know that you wanted to go to the military, or did you join the military first? Walk me through the timeline there.
Yeah. So no, I had no interest in the military when I went to Michigan State, but I was a junior when 9/11 happened.
Oh,
yeah. So I can remember watching the second plane fly into the buildings, and I was like, okay, I'm going to graduate and then I'm going to join the military. And my dad actually talked me out of it. Because he's like, hey, listen, because I had a really solid job lined up after school, and he's like, listen, like, take the job, like the military will be there in 4 years or whatever if you don't like the job, and then go for there. And I'm like, okay, I could see that. So that's what I ended up doing. So I took that job and I worked there for about 4 years, and I'm big on integrity, and some stuff happened at the top levels of the organization I wasn't a big fan of. So I decided to start looking around. I looked at MBAs, looked at other jobs, and then I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm 26 years old. I'm not married. I have no kids, nothing else. So I'll sell everything I own and I'll go join the military. And that's when I left. So I was an old lieutenant when I showed up. So
I was just going to say that. Yeah. Joining at 26. Yeah. You're above the average, I guess, for sure. Okay. All right. And why the Army?
I looked at some of the other services. I really had no interest in the Navy.
Okay.
It's not my thing. I looked at the Air Force, and not anything I wanted to do there other than fly, and that wasn't really going to happen coming in as an OTS is what they call it. Very, 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 very low probability. And I wanted to do something really hard. So I looked at the Marines and I looked at the Army, and the Marines, like they've got great esprit de corps, but I think it was probably between them and the Army. I had the lineage for my dad being in the Army, so that's probably just where I kind of just leaned that direction, and then just that's what I ended up joining.
Okay. Did you ever try to go deeper, like to try to be a Ranger or anything? Did you ever try out for anything hardcore?
No, I mean, I went to Ranger school. That doesn't make you a Ranger. Like you have to actually be in Ranger battalions. So going to school, that's what it is. It's school. No, I never had aspirations to make the military a career, not active duty anyways. Okay. I wanted to go in and serve my country and learn skills that I could apply to the civilian sector. So that's what I did. I was only active duty for 4 years. I've been in the reserves, in National Guard for an additional 12 on top of that. So I'm still a drilling reservist. Even I've got Army duty this coming weekend.
Really?
I'm still in, but I like the part-time. Active duty was not necessarily my thing.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. So you get out after 4 years. What did you have a plan?
So I kind of did. They had nothing to do with Spartan.
Okay.
I was married at the time, and my wife, so Lindsay worked for a government contractor in DC. So we ended up back in DC, and I started applying for jobs for the federal government, and I got one pretty quick. So I started kind of working for the government. That was really, I got to pretty senior levels when I left the government. 6 years after I started in my mid 30s, I was a GS-15, which is the top level of the government before you move to the senior executive service.
What was the functionality of that job? Tactically, what were you doing?
Program stuff, project management, strategic planning, risk management, that kind of stuff.
Okay. All right.
So I worked for various agencies. I worked for the National Institutes of Health. I worked for Homeland Security, and I left when I was at the VA.
I see. Okay. Wow. I'm still trying to figure out how Spartan comes into this. I'm trying
the government really helped me with that. I didn't appreciate kind of my experience with the government. I learned a lot of good things, but I wasn't super stoked on my coworkers. Maybe I was just in the wrong places. It just wasn't really the atmosphere for me. And quite frankly, I thought it was more management than leadership. And some of the stuff there was really stupid. Like when I worked at Homeland, I'd finish my work and I'd be like, hey, what else should I do today? And well, we don't really have anything okay, well, I'm going to go home because what am I going to do? Sit there in my cubicle? And they're like, well, go home, you have to take leave. I'm like, well, but I don't have anything to do. And I just came to you as my supervisor, right? So just a bunch of really dumb stuff I didn't appreciate at all. I was just like, this is silly. So that's really what prompted me to want to start a company. Not that I have this entrepreneurial bug or anything else. I just hated everybody and everywhere I worked, and I wanted to create an environment that didn't suck.
I love that.
And I think we've done that here at Spartan.
It is amazing how many lazy people there are out there, isn't it? It blows me away. There are so many people walking around on the planet that just don't have the same drive. They don't have the same aspirations. They will sit on the couch and do nothing if they have an opportunity. And I've always I'm amazed by that mentality for myself. I grew up in Oklahoma. My dad was an oil field worker. I mean, and there was no like chilling out. Like it was, you go all the time, right? The work ethic was super high. And now when I meet people, I'm just like, how?
I think there's a lot of really motivated folks that work for the federal government, at least when they start. That's kind of the way I was.
Oh,
There's if you really feel like you're contributing to the mission, then that can be enough to drive you. I think that it has grown to a certain point to where there's a lot of jobs that are just jobs, and working harder doesn't get you anything. So there's really a mismatch of priorities there. I don't necessarily, because I did work with a lot of like really good folks. I worked with a lot of folks that do more damage going to work than if they just stayed home and stared at the wall all day. But I think there's just it's a misalignment of incentives. I think there a little bit, which is where I didn't necessarily fit in. I believe that if you work really hard, that you should be rewarded for that, both in being able to achieve a mission and not. I can honestly say that everything I worked on in my 8 years in the federal government was probably completely undone or thrown away as soon as somebody new came in. So not a very fulfilling place for me anyways. So, but there's a lot of folks that work hard.
So you're coming home at night, you're talking to your wife, you're like, man, I'm just disenchanted with this whole thing. Like, I don't know, this is not motivating me. How do you formulate the plan for Spartan? How does that come about?
So it comes about by using all those skills that I grabbed for the 4 years while I was on active duty.
Okay.
And really kind of on the planning side. And that's one of the reasons I chose the infantry, because I knew I would be very much on the planning side and like leading troops in combat and writing operations orders and things like that go into kind of assessing your operating environment and kind of understanding what you should do. And that's kind of like where when I started writing the plan for Spartan, I went through the traditional business plan writing, and it was one of those things that real estate was always something I was interested in. I grew up framing houses. That's how I that's how I got money in high school.
Okay.
How I paid for some of my schooling was framing houses. So I enjoyed the built environment. I liked real estate. So that was kind of trying to marry the two things. And one of the things for me personally that I've always done is I've always tried to build up the people that are around me. And one of the more impactful things that I've done in my life was I did a study abroad program as an undergrad in Thailand. And I went and I lived there before the program, and I stayed afterwards. And I actually taught English to underprivileged women in Thailand to get them out of the sex trade.
Wow.
So we're really trying to improve like lives. And that's kind of where our original mission statement of improving lives through real estate kind of came. So.
Yeah, I saw that. Did you and your wife have some rental properties or any investments in real estate before you started Spartan? No?
So investments, no. Some lingering condos that we bought when we were both single and turned into rentals, then yes. But it's funny, the only deal I've ever lost money on is the condo that I bought in Chicago and turned into a rental as a single family rental. So we're not big single family folks. When we started Spartan, we started with flipping houses and whatnot, because that's the money that we could come up with. And DC in 2016 and 2017, or even earlier than that, 2014, I mean, everybody was still like, real estate's a bad idea and all this other stuff. They were wrong. But that's kind of how we got started, was the single family, and then quickly pivoted to larger and bigger deals. And that's when we built a team around us that had more experience with that.
Okay, so let's pause right there for the listeners. All right, so when it first started, it was just you and your wife as owners, and you did some flips. Or were you and your co-founder, or who was in the original? Okay.
Yep, co-founder.
Okay, you and your
so
co-founder
didn't come in till later.
Okay.
Till a couple of years in, we had done 4 or 5 flips by that point. So
I see. All right, and for the audience that doesn't understand flips or whatever, I mean, you're buying something on the cheap, you're throwing a little money into it to fix it up, you're reselling it, turning a profit.
We actually never did it that way. And it's funny,
okay.
like I don't recommend residential for anybody anymore because I don't like it. I'm not saying it's not good, but it's just not my bag of tricks. But when folks do ask how we got started, the smallest renovation we've ever done is $150,000 on an 850 square foot row home in DC. So most people are afraid of doing a big renovation, and they've actually, in my opinion, have it wrong. Doing the lipstick renovation is actually where you can get into trouble, because if you go into this place and you've got a $40,000 budget, you've got a $40,000 budget, which means if you miss something like electrical or something like that, you're going to blow your budget by a significant percentage. And whether you can or cannot come up with that money is questionable, right? If you go in and you're going to fully gut a house, what's the probability of you running into a problem? Pretty low. You're tearing everything out.
That's true.
So what are you worried about? Who gives a shit if the electrical works? You're ripping it out. The only thing I worry about is structural stuff, right? That's the only thing. Like you can inspect that. It's very hard to inspect electrical. I'll give you an example. My Ryan's house, his real house, the one he lives in, he had an electrical inspection and whole 9 yards, and he went in there to do electrical work after he bought the house. And the inspector, who for the most part, they're not actually worth the money that you pay them, because they're not liable for anything. So if they get it wrong, they're liable for the $350 that you paid them. Well, who cares? Like, what are you worried about, right? So his guy missed. He had the old like I forget what it's called, like the little where the wire wraps around the little thing that sticks up. So Ryan's like, oh, well, I guess I'm rewiring my entire house because this is all out of code and I can't do anything with it. So when you go back in, so we started flipping houses by cutting the whole thing. And I actually think that's a safer thing for folks to do when you're starting, because when you get stuff wrong, number one, your budget's a lot bigger, right? So if you go in with $150,000 budget and you have a 5% contingency, that's $7,500. So if you miss stuff here and there, you're probably going to be okay, versus going in at 40,000 with a 5% contingency and you got $200.
For the listeners, how did you cash flow the first flip? Did you guys just personal savings on both sides? You put the money into it, or how did you do it? If you don't mind walking the listener through that.
No, it's a good question. So, when you look at entrepreneurship, you got a lot of young folks that are like, I'm 22 and I'm going to start a company. Okay, you can. And there's definitely some folks that are very successful doing that. The average age of an entrepreneur, I think, is like 38.
Yeah.
The reason, right? When you start a company, you got to make sure that you don't make bad decisions, and hungry bellies make bad decisions. So when Ryan and I started, we just went and got a bank loan. A lot of people can't do that because they don't have a good balance sheet. They don't have a good resume. They don't have good savings. We were not in that way. Neither Ryan nor I come from money. My family does not have any money. They would be frankly, they would be homeless if it wasn't for the house that I bought them. So like, my family has nothing. Ryan's family is a little better off than mine, but he doesn't have a trust fund or anything else like that. So how'd you
get the loan? What did they put up for collateral? Your current house?
So I tapped my 401k, asked my father-in-law, who Lindsay's parents are much different than mine, asked my father-in-law. So, and then that's how we bought the house for cash. So they were able to put the first position on the house. But even then we had to call 27 banks, even with like really good jobs and stuff like that. So that's, one of the things I give, aspiring entrepreneurs, especially if you're going to go into a space like real estate where it's heavily reliant on debt and credit. Yes. Like, make sure you get your stuff wired tight before you go try to do this. There's hard money and there's those types of loans out there, and there's some good lenders and whatnot in that space, but it's expensive and you got to make sure you're right. Yeah. For newbies starting out using hard money, it's a more riskier proposition than what we had to start with.
That first flip was key. Did you quit your job before you guys did that first flip, or were you doing double duty there for a little bit?
I was doing quadruple duty. At one point in time, I was working for the VA, which I will freely admit was not a very taxing job. Let's just put it that way. I had plenty of time to focus on other stuff, but I was also doing my master's degree. I was in command for the National Guard and doing flips on the side. It was
I love it.
An unpleasant time. I didn't watch much TV and really focused on just getting that stuff done at that point. So no, for the first probably, I bet you for the first 4 years of Spartan's existence, I had my government job, which again, I was in an enviable position to where I had additional time to focus, and it wasn't a very taxing job. And Ryan is a commercial airline pilot, so even when he was flying, he could still be reading and studying, and then when he lands, right? So, and those guys generally work 10 to 16 days a month, and the rest of the time they're off. So we had a lot of time to be able to do that. So
very good. Okay. Good for the listeners to hear that. So you guys are burning the midnight oil there, getting this thing going at first and doing some flips, working some other jobs. Okay. All right. Yeah. I'm starting to see the picture now. All right. And by the way, how'd you meet your co-founder? How'd you guys meet?
Neighbor.
He's your neighbor. Oh, okay.
He was my neighbor in DC. That's why, like,
Uh,
whenever folks ask us, like, how did you meet your co-founder or how did you find your first employees? Our story sucks because it's not repeatable, right? Like, Ryan was my neighbor. Like, good luck.
Good luck.
Like, so good luck, right? And like we've been at it now for about 8 years.
Yeah, I
So
saw. Oh, yeah, yeah,
good
very
luck.
good. Oh, wow. So you guys get going on some flips. All right. At some point, you both did he? By the way, did he quit his job? Now is he all? Are you? I'm assuming you're both all in at this point.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did that transition happen? Can you give us a short version of, okay, you guys are like having beers one day and you're like, okay, man, bro, all right, bro, let's quit our jobs and just go all in. Like walk us through that.
Yeah, so we had the first deal, and I had another partner, Brian. This could get real confusing real fast. So Brian with a B was an original partner. Ryan came on right after that. So I got Brian and Ryan.
Okay.
And we had started that first flip with Brian. Ryan was the neighbor, and I was like, hey, Brian, like Ryan is this really solid dude. Like we got to bring him into this.
I see.
So my cousin was trying to buy some salt from Egypt. So long story, went nowhere. But long story short, is I went next door, and my cousin was trying to raise 300 grand to import salt from Egypt. But harebrained scheme that never worked, right? And we didn't invest. We said no because we couldn't get comfortable with it. But I went next door to Ryan. I'm like, hey man, all right, listen, this is what I need. I need 100 grand from you. Remember, like Ryan's in his late 20s. I'm in my like early 30s, right? He's about 5 years younger than I am. So we're pretty young, right? So 100 grand is quite a bit of money. And neither one of us came from money again. Like, so I'm like, all right, man, I need 100 grand. He's like, what do you need for me? We're going to buy some salt from Egypt. He's like, okay. I'm like, all right, like if this guy's crazy enough to buy some salt with me from Egypt, probably a good partner. So that's kind of how that started. And then Brian didn't work out. So Brian transitioned out, and then it was just me and Ryan the rest of the time.
Wow. All right. And then what about going all in full time? How did you just do enough deals where you had enough cash in the bank where you felt comfortable saying, okay, we're going to quit our jobs?
Right. So we were actually not the first ones to go full time with Spartan. Both of our wives.
Oh,
so
really?
We looked at that because we had really flexible jobs.
I see.
So when folks ask us for our kind of initial employees, it was actually Lindsay and Jackie that were our first employees that came on. Yeah. Lindsay came on as our director of business intelligence, and Jackie came on as our director of operations. Lindsay came from the intelligence community for Special Operations Command, and Jackie had managed and worked for Hilton, managed hotels and worked for Hilton International. So she had kind of that mindset. So like, that's what people were like, well, how do you find your first employees and pay them? Well, you marry them and don't pay them anything.
Yeah.
So again, like here we were able to get two people that really added a lot of value to the business for free. Because it was basically, hey, listen, like we did pay them. We put their salaries on the balance sheet and paid them out like at liquidity events before we had flow to be able to do that. But a lot of people aren't willing to do that. Now they have ownership in the business and whatnot as spouses and as initial contributors to the business, but they were actually full-time before Ryan and I were. So for me, I was able to go, I got caught up in this reorganization at the VA where they essentially forgot about an office. So I was able to spend a lot of time putting time in Spartan, and Ryan was flying, so that like he cut his flying way back, and they could ratchet up and ratchet back as they need to.
I see.
And then I had quit flying, or I had quit my VA job, and then Ryan basically took his flying to zero. So,
I really appreciate you sharing some of these details. This is such great information for the listeners, right? Like, so many people will go to your website, by the way, and for the listeners, and we'll get into a Spartan overview, but they'll go to your website, which I really like, but very nice website. Love the YouTube video that you have on there with the overview of you speaking. It's Spartan-investors.com. If you go to the website and you look at your profile, you look at the website, you look at the team, you watch the video, I mean, you're like, wow, okay, these guys got their shit together. Like this looks pretty. I mean, the average viewer of that would have no idea that, hey man, this started with me and my neighbor and we, double timing it, and our wives worked for free and their salaries had to go on the balance sheet. And by the way, I had to talk my father-in-law into backing us for their first loan. And these are the things that entrepreneurs go through to get started. It's so easy for the average person to look at somebody like you and look at the company and go, oh, well, he probably came from family money and he was in the military and his parents probably gave him the money to start Spartan. I mean, it's so easy to think that. And so I appreciate you sharing the real journey, because it takes a lot of risks, right? A lot of guts and determination and risk to get these things going. Love that story.
So it's one of those things. I will say though, we do have our shit together. And the reason I say that is because like I didn't necessarily know that I was going to be starting a company and an entrepreneur, and neither did Ryan, right? Like Ryan is more the entrepreneur than me. So Cutco knives, he'd like convince his buddies to paint fences and all this other shit, not me. But one of the things I did do is I knew I knew I was moving towards a leadership role. And I knew that's where and this is from very, very early on, even when I graduated from college. So for the first 14 years or so of my career, maybe a little less, maybe like 12 years, because I think I was like 34 when we started Spartan, I was moving through and doing all this different stuff. So my first job out of college was a sales manager for a biotech firm.
I saw that.
23 years old. I've got a chemistry degree and a marketing degree. So they hire me on. I'm in Chicago. I have 14 states. I'm 23. I have a lot of trust, and I'm having to plan all my travel and everything and learn to be a human, like in the workforce. And in that role, I would always volunteer for shit I had no qualifications to do, like try budgeting and stuff like that. And like most of it was wrong, but 20% of it was right, which means my boss didn't have to do 20% of the work that I gave him. So I would try to do stuff in sales and marketing and try to be a part of all this different stuff. And then I joined the military with a specific focus to go get leadership training and combat experience and put myself in really hard things. And then when I came out for the federal government, I worked in strategic planning, project management, and risk management.
Love it.
When you think about the skill sets that I built, and I did a master's degree in leadership at that time, and I've done like all this National Guard work. So all of these skill sets that I've put together and gathered over that 12 years or whatever it was, before I started Spartan, and even while I started Spartan with the master's degree and still today with the military stuff, it was that I think that's why everything looks put together, is because everything we've done has been very intentional. We do plans for everything, and our new strategic plan will actually be out and on the website here in probably a couple of days.
I love that. I love that you're open about talking about the strategic plan and how it ties into daily tactical operations. The fact that you talk about that on your video, I don't see that. In fact, I've interviewed over 300 entrepreneurs on the Riderflex podcast. I've never seen a video like that. I love it.
It's one of those things. It's what is it? If you have 1 hour to chop down a tree, you got to sharpen your axe for 10 or whatever that saying is.
Yes.
So everything that we do at Spartan is very, very intentional. We have a lot of systems and processes, and I think we have systems and processes at a small firm of 115 people or whatever we're at today, that you don't see in larger firms. I just finished the second level of our leadership development program that is a year long, that we put our leaders, we have an emerging leaders program for folks that have never led that go through that. And then we have an operational leaders for the next level. So I think what you're seeing is a very an intentionality that we've come at with this. And I think that comes from Ryan and I's training, right? Like as a military officer, if I got shit wrong, people died. And if Ryan got stuff wrong in the plane, it fell out of the sky. So
seriously,
there's not a lot of like just winging it when you're in the air or on the ground getting shot at. So I think there's an intentionality about both of us that we bring to the organization that maybe some other folks don't bring in.
You can feel it on yourself and your website and the company. It makes the investors a lot more comfortable. I can tell you that anybody that's thinking about giving you money to put into real estate is going to be a little bit more relaxed, knowing that you guys are well buttoned up. As a recruiting firm, we deal with all kinds of different companies, right? And I've led a couple of $40 million companies myself before I started Riderflex. And I will tell you, Scott, most companies are messy. Most companies are messy.
All of them are. I mean, you think that Twitter's not a dumpster fire right now?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I always tell everybody, I'm talking about Denver, so people may not know what I'm talking about, but you drive up and down I-25, you see a company sign from the side of the highway, and you just kind of think, oh, look, there's a nice company. They must be doing well. No, I can guarantee you, if you go in there and visit with people, there's shit wrong. It's messy in places. They're probably barely hanging on by a thread. Cash flow is probably tight. I mean, I see it all the time. And so what's so refreshing is to feel the organized and polished, buttoned up approach from you guys, because not everybody's like that, man. Not everybody's. It's great for the investors. It's great for your employees because they probably appreciate the fact that things are organized and clean. I mean, my recruiters come to me every week. Every week they're like, "Oh my God, this fucking client you signed is a shit ball." Like, most companies are messy. So it's great. I love the fact that you guys are well buttoned up like that. So congrats on that look and feel. I love what you're doing. Can you now is probably a good time. Give us the Spartan Investment Group overview as it stands today, if you don't mind giving us the pitch. Go for it.
So, Spartan Investment Group is a vertically integrated investment firm. We find our own deals. We have an in-house acquisitions team that goes out and finds the deals. And right now we're focused on self-storage. As you'll see in the new plan, we are gonna add a couple more asset classes over the next couple of years. We've wanted to do that for a while, but we just didn't have the scale to be able to do it without getting distracted. We fund our own deals through an extensive network of retail capital. We're going to be looking to add institutional capital as well to that, but we also have a capital markets team that goes out and finds all of our loans right now. Okay. And then we finish them, and we have in-house property management through our free up storage company, and then we have in-house construction management through Spartan Construction Management. So we call it the 3F operating model, where we find our own deals, we fund our own deals, and we finish our deals.
Love it. Okay, very good. So storage is a primary focus right now. Why? Well, is it just so lucrative? Is it easy money? What's the reason?
So leveraging a military process or an army process called the military decision-making process, which is a structured decision-making framework that you can use in complex and ambiguous environments where you don't have all of the information or you're inexperienced. Part of that whole process is to come up with evaluation criteria that you can measure your courses of action against. So when we were looking at, we didn't want to do single family, we didn't want to do residential anymore. So we wanted to pivot into commercial asset classes. So we looked at developing 3 evaluation criteria to go and assess all these different opportunities out there that were ahead of us. And we came up with the 3 E's: easy to evict, easy to maintain, easy to operate.
I love it.
When you look at all the asset classes, with easy to evict as being the number one for us, because we have a belief here at Spartan that we have integrity, and if we make a contract together, then we're going to honor that, and you have to honor it back, and we don't want other people impacting it, right? And with multifamily, there's a lot of, multifamily is a great asset class. It just wasn't necessarily one that we wanted to be a part of because of the eviction process. Obviously, it's a very, very hard process to go through, regardless of what state you're in. But so when we looked at the asset classes, storage was the easiest to evict, easiest to maintain, and then not the easiest to operate, but that's the one that we really liked. And it was more of a blue ocean market for us, being newer to the space versus trying to come into multifamily with not a ton of experience and going into a very, very established space.
Do you stay away from residential today because you got burned a bunch for having to evict renters that wouldn't pay? You just had too many times where you're just like, okay, I just don't want to do this anymore.
Nope. None of that. We've never invested in it at all. So some people may say, hey, you've got an experience, you really don't know what you're talking about. And they're probably right. But it's our evaluation criteria. So we kind of evaluated it that way. And I can tell you that the best multifamily in the world does not clean out a unit with no damage in 30 days like it does with storage. So there is no asset class that's easier to evict than storage.
Now you're making me nervous, Scott, because I've recently made some investments in some. Tell me what you think of this. You're the expert. Tell me what you think of this philosophy or strategy. I tend to think that the remote workforce will continue to expand, which will cause more people to venture out into rural areas, maybe an hour and a half or further from a major city, which they wouldn't have done before because it was too far to commute. And they'll start buying up some of these properties that are cheaper, and living in some of these smaller towns, that maybe were unreachable before because you just couldn't drive the commute. And so I've made some investments in some of those towns recently with some residential property that I felt like I could sell it tomorrow probably and get my money back, no problem. What do you think of that strategy?
I'm a very contrarian view. I think remote work is garbage.
Okay.
And Wall Street Journal article today just said a lot of companies are bringing people back to the office right now.
You think that'll happen?
I think what will happen is people will come back to the office or they'll be fired. And like it's going to be what I think is going to be. It's going to be hidden in the whole like, hey, we're on a downturn type thing. But it's going to be, when you look about the people that are being laid off first, it's going to be your remote workers, because that's what I would do. Because
that's what you would do. Yeah.
I don't care what anybody says. There's no science whatsoever to back this up that a company is more productive with 100% remote work. I think it's a fallacy. I think people are lying to themselves, because that's what they like. Leaders that are like, oh, we're just as good remote. They want to be remote. That's why they would be incongruous if they said anything different. So I actually think that in 2 years from now, COVID won't be a thing. And the 1918 pandemic, we went back to life as usual. And what? By the roaring 20s, right? Like 2 years later, we were in the roaring 20s, right? After
commercial office space as an investment is not dead, is what you're saying.
I think it might spread out a little bit. I think there may be a slightly different model to the way that office space is used. So I think the hub and spoke model will be out there.
Okay.
Are the urban corridors going to go away? I don't think so. I think people wanted to live downtowns for a reason. Like they want to live down, right? So like, I think you'll get back to kind of the way that we were living before COVID. Will there be more flexibility in hybrid approaches? Yes. Spartan has been hybrid since day one in 2016 when we all opened our first office. We were remote on Mondays and Fridays.
I see. And still like that today? Still like
that today. And I think what you're going to see is if companies want to perform the same way in the hybrid approach that they do in the 5-day-a-week approach, they need to get a lot clearer on their standards for their team members and eliminate those that aren't cutting it. Spartan.
What about this? What about this buzz around this 4-day work week push? What about that? What are your thoughts?
I think I don't think it's ever going to work, and this is why.
Okay.
Unless you are, I shouldn't say it probably won't work at scale, and here's why. Okay. At Spartan, we try to do no meeting Fridays, right? So essentially, like, you get to work from home. You're not distracted by meetings. You better be getting a lot of stuff done. How many no meeting Fridays do you think we have? Almost none. Why? Because the rest of the world doesn't give a rat's ass about the no meeting Friday. So when you think of the 4-day work week, anything like that that's not uniform isn't going to be as productive, right? Because the rest of the world doesn't give a shit about your new age progressive approach. They care about what they need, right? So like, we're going to work 4 days a week. Well, how many key times are you going to miss something on a Friday or a Monday or a Wednesday or whatever day you decide not to work in the office and you shut your company down? How many, as entrepreneurs and leaders of the business, how many opportunities are you going to miss so you can go to a 4-day work week?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. No, it's good.
Before you eliminate it and go back. Now, can you do it ad hoc? Can you do it where parts of this and parts of that and have it as an option to where you do a 4-day work week? Maybe there is a function inside the business that can do 4 10-hour days and have no impact. It really doesn't matter. I think that there is not going to be any uniform approach to anything, and I don't think there needs to be. I think that the traditional 5-day-a-week butts in a seat show up at 8, leave at 5. I think there's no need for that anymore. If you're willing to be tough with your workforce and eliminate those that aren't performing, manage by results instead of like butts and seats. I really don't think there's any room for McGregor theory X like anymore in a knowledge worker environment. But then you've got to be willing to have those really tough conversations and eliminate team members that aren't performing. And that's where I think it fails a little bit. Is I think a lot of folks are especially in today's society, have a struggle with that. So I think it's getting easier now that the recession is coming on us. Yes, I think it's easier.
Yes. No doubt about it. Do you see this whole millennial? I hate to pick on millennials all the time. Younger people, younger than us. This whole like entitlement. I want work-life balance. I don't want to work very hard. I really don't. Please don't. Everything you say to me offends me, or you're hurting my feelings, or you're being tough on me, and this whole whiny. I mean, what do you feel that? Do you sense that in the market? Is that just me being an old curmudgeon? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
So there's an HBR article titled "Pygmalion in Management," and Pygmalion was a character in King Lear. And in the play, the king sees Pygmalion as a very young member, like as a child in the court, and he treats her like a child as she grows up. So she acts exactly like she's being treated, right? So she stays a child even though she's a grown woman now. I think with the millennial generation, there's a little bit of Pygmalion in management going on, right? There's perception that is being amplified through a communication medium now, through social media and all this. The amplifications are so much wider on anything, whether doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, anything can be amplified by folks that may or may not know what they're talking about. We've got a bunch of millennials here that are really hardworking. There's definitely, like, every generation has its own nuance, right? Like when the baby boomers were coming of age, the greatest generation was like, those damn baby boomers are listening to rock and roll, and they want to wear leather jackets, and they're rolling their pants, and like all of this stuff.
Right.
And then the baby boomers have kids, and like those Gen Xers, man, like, geez, like everybody bitches about the next generation and the generation of them, right? Guarantee there's some Gen Z, millennials bitching about the Gen Zs about something, right? That's just the nature of human beings. I do think that the baby boomers as a parental generation may have not necessarily have taken kind of the hardship away from life a little bit, but also, I mean, millennials had it pretty tough. A lot of those guys were graduating from college in 08, 09, 07.
That's true.
2010, 2011. So, I mean, they ran straight into the buzzsaw with like trying to come out in a basically a recession, and probably the worst financial situation we've had in decades. So I do think each generation has their own characteristics, and those characteristics can be frustrated from the other generations. But I got to tell you, we've got a bunch of mid-30s folks, like late 20s, mid-30s folks that are working their asses off, and I think if you hire right, you can find that silent majority out there that is not chiming up.
Yes, I think there's a large. By the way, I think there's a huge silent majority. And we could go down that rabbit hole, but we don't have enough time right now. I do know this. I'm 55, and boy, I remember the way we used to manage, like with the things we could say to our employees when I was a manager in my 20s and 30s or whatever. I mean, if they were dicking around, I could just be like, hey, get your fucking shit together. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, I could just have conversations. I didn't have to worry about somebody calling HR and, whatever. I didn't have to worry about any of that, which I thought was great. But no, I'm not picking on all my HR friends.
I think it's part of what we accept as a society. So I have a very hard time blaming the individual when the leaders around accept and allow it to happen.
Yes, right. Oh man. We need a whole nother hour on that topic. Let me ask you, we're about to run out of time. So let's double back here and wrap this up by you telling me in your own words, I mean, you do a great job of it on the video and on the website, but just here for this episode, why Spartan? Why, if I want to, why should I give you my money, Scott? Why invest in Spartan? Go for it.
So, we say this to all investors. It's not about the investment, it's about the team. And it's about the systems and processes that the team uses to mitigate risk. That's what it's all about, right? Like, investing is inherently risky. So you have to bet on the team, because the deal doesn't matter. It really doesn't. Because if you have a really solid team, then even a tough deal, and Spartan's had its tough deals. Like, we're not all gumdrops and lollipops over here. We're very transparent, and we will let you know what's happening. But I think that's part of it, right? Every team out there, just like we talked about, every company is a dumpster fire inside. Yeah. Every investment has its dumpster fire moment. It does. Yeah. But for the investors, it's really about understanding those moments and understanding what the team is going to do to fix it.
Love that.
I'd say that the reason that the reason investors should invest with Spartan is because of our transparency. We're not always going to get everything right. It's just not going to happen. But what we will always get right is we will tell you what we're going to do to fix it when stuff doesn't go right. And any group that you talk to that says that we've never had a deal go bad, we've never had any problems, is lying to your face. Maybe they've never lost money, because as of right now, Spartan has never lost money. But we've definitely had deals go sideways on us that we've fixed. That we've had some deals that we didn't make returns. We've also had deals that we absolutely crushed it. But those are the deals that are also failures, because you didn't predict it. And the thing with investing is you want to see, like, what happened. Did you see what was supposed to happen, which is what you actually predicted? So folks that are out there and they're just like, oh, we crushed all these results and all this other stuff, you should really ask, well, why? And really dig into in understanding why they were able to crush those results. So for Spartan, I think the number one reason that folks should invest with us is we have a really solid team. A lot of folks say that, but you can go to the website and you can review the plan and understand the processes that we're going to use. And we're going to be transparent and communicate with you no matter what's happening.
Spartan-investments.com. Scott Lewis, thank you very much for sharing your story on the Riderflex podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate being on it.